So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Getting Ready for Legislative Session webinar. It's being hosted by our National Parent Leadership Institute, and my name is Melvette Hill. I am a parent leader. I graduated Danbury PLTI in 2004. That's Danbury, Connecticut. And I'm so excited to be here in this role as, our NPLI communications specialist. So that's why I'm on this webinar. I'm hoping to lend some of my expertise to the topic as well. And so I wanted to bring you greetings from our co-directors, Patty Keckison and Donna Thompson-Bennett. Not only are they the co-directors, but they too are PLTI graduates. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the National Parent Leadership Institute for those of you who are not familiar with the work that we do. It began as the national replication arm of the Connecticut Parent Leadership Training Institute, what we all know is as PLTI, and that was developed by the Commission on Children in 1992. So PLTI is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, which is completely awesome. So parents who wish to improve the lifelong health, safety, and learning of children become practiced change agents for the next generation through PLTI. And for those of us who have been through PLTI, we know exactly what that is and how it feels. So the mission of NPLI is this. They exist to coordinate and increase the civic skills and impact of diverse parents to improve child and community outcomes as they build caring communities. That's a little bit about NPLI. I would like to share with you today a little bit on our speakers who are going to be, sharing some really good information with me on the call. So our first speaker is Jamila Jackson. Some people know her as Jackie. She is a parent leader and graduate of Waterbury PLTI class of 2017. She runs a convert care program at United Muslim Masjid, where she teaches basic Islam, women's rights in Islam, and provides support for displaced, abused, neglected, and abandoned Muslim women and children. She is a community organizer with Naugatuck Valley Project and secretary of their board of directors. She is a public speaker who has been featured at several unity rallies, community centers, and travels throughout Connecticut educating on Islam in rural communities as part of what we call here an initiative called Honest Conversations. So since graduating PLTI, Jamila has become active in local and state politics, serving as founding member of the Waterbury Sensitivity Task Force, which grew out of the community response to pleas from the Muslim and immigrant communities for protection in the wake of the current presidency. I'm sorry, I'm just going to ask, we're hearing some background noise. If you could just mute your line. Hello? Hi, we're hearing some footsteps. If someone could just mute their line. If you can mute your line, that would be great. Thank you. At the state level, Jamila visits the Capitol on a monthly basis while it's in session to bring real-time community concerns to her representatives. In January 2018, she will launch a community-based program for adolescent girls. She lives in Waterbury, Connecticut with her husband and 2 daughters. So we're excited to have our parent leader on the call today. She has a lot of information to bring. And then also, on the call, we have Stephen Hernandez, Esquire. He is the Executive Director for the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors, and that's here in Connecticut. Many of you may know that the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors is, directly legislative staff to our Connecticut General Assembly. Stephen previously served as the Connecticut State Legislature's Director of Public Policy and Research for the Connecticut Commission on Children. And prior to joining the commission, Stephen served 7 years as legislative and budget director in the office of Washington, D.C. Council member Jim Graham. He served as a clerk to 2 judges in the District's Court of Appeals and as a consultant to the Washington law firm Baker and Miller, PLLC. He received a Bachelor of Arts degree from Bennington College in Vermont in 1995 and a Juris Doctor degree from the Washington College of Law at American University. So I hope you are ready, everyone, for all the good stuff that we have lined up for you today. I'm going to once again ask our newcomers to the webinar if you can kindly mute your line. There will be time to engage later during Q&A. We're recording the webinar, so we want to eliminate as much background noise as possible. So let's get started. So the majority of state legislatures start session in the month of January and February, and that's why we're hosting this webinar during the month of December. And while we know that there are a lot of holidays going on, we thought it was important to get this in before the new year. Many times parents and family leaders hear about issues or public hearings late in session, and they scramble to rally support or inform their communities about these critical issues facing their children. And conversely, there are others who are very aware of these issues and want to participate in public policy early on. So this webinar is really designed to inform and inspire you as you prepare. And I'm saying that again, as you all prepare. So the people who are on this call, I'm hoping that you will be inspired to prepare for the upcoming legislative session. We'll discuss how to engage state legislators on public policy issues concerning children and families. We'll talk about how to continue advocacy and civic engagement in the current political climate, and also how to tap into resources. So let's just get down to the bottom of it, right? Before we get into the deep stuff, let's talk about what legislative session is. It's the period of time in which a legislature is convened for the purpose of lawmaking. So there are two different types of sessions. One is regular session, which is the annual or biennial gathering of legislators. The starting date and often the length of it is determined by the state constitution or statutes. Then there's also something that's called special session, and it's for the purposes of this particular webinar. We're going to really stick to regular session, but special session is convened when there's special business to discuss things that were not taken care of during the regular session. So today, 46 legislatures meet in regular session annually, and 4 of them meet biennially. So that would be Montana, Nevada, North Dakota, and Texas. So that means that they convene regular session every other year. In the early 1960s, legislative sessions looked a lot different. There were 31 legislatures that met every other year, and 19 met annually. So that really has changed. When we look at the landscape now, things are different. And so by the mid-1970s, 41 states held regular sessions, while only 19 met every other year. And then so it continued to evolve to where now we only have a few states that meet every other year. So when do legislative sessions begin and end? So as you can see here on this map, it's beautiful and it's purple and green. This was the legislative session map for 2017. And so as we said, most sessions begin in January or February, so now we're at the end of the year. And you'll see on this map that most of them have already adjourned. The ones in the purple are ones that are adjourned. And you'll see with the color coding that there are some things still going on. On the bottom in the green, you'll see that those are what we call our territories. So I'm just going to allow you to take a look. Maybe you can find your state on the map. The green are in session. And all this information will be available after the webinar, probably posted by Tuesday on our NPLI website. So no need to try to do screenshots and all that good stuff. We're going to give you the complete PDF and some other resources as well. Here's the legislative session calendar. So this is available through the National Council of State Legislatures, and it's also available in other areas as well. You can find it on the internet. You can just Google it. But I just wanted to show you an example, and we have this available in a PDF format as well. You can see on the left it shows the state, and it shows when they convene or when the session begins, when it adjourns or ends, and then there are some comments there. And you'll also see on the right where there are special sessions and why, what has brought it into special session. So for those of us in Connecticut, we know there was special session because we couldn't get to a good vote on a state budget. And now we have that. So we might not be happy with all the results that we get, but there are outcomes. that are needed to get to the next stage. Our session in Connecticut actually is beginning again in February, and we have what's a short session, so we won't meet for a full 6 months, but it'll be a shorter session. So this is probably what you want to know. Why should parent and family leaders care about legislative session? Well, first off, it's the time lawmakers are making decisions that will affect your family and your community. Secondly, it's a key time when you can use your voice, individually or collectively. And thirdly, it's an opportune time to build relationships, alliances, and coalitions. So I want to take a few moments to hear from our parent leader on the call and community activist and a woman who wears many hats. Jamila, if you can give us a little insight on these 3 points, because you've experienced them all. And if you can tell us about maybe some of your work during the 2017 legislative session, maybe how you prepared for it, and some of the things that you did during session.
Okay, thank you, Melvet. Like Melvet said, my name is Jamila. I go by Jackie. And there are some pretty easy ways to engage your representatives. So what I ended up going to the Capitol during the regular session and then during the special sessions to fight for some causes that were very near and dear to my heart and other parents in our community. And as Melvet said, we were experiencing some stress because we did not have a budget to operate with, and everyone was kind of fighting for their own little piece of the pie. And so what happened, a group of parents who have children who are in charter schools in Connecticut wanted equal funding for their children, the same as you have for traditional public school. They wanted to get equal funding for charter schools. And so we got together and started thinking of ways that we could get the attention of the representatives who were sitting on the committees. And what we came up with was a letter writing campaign. And what we did was the group of parents went out to all the schools and got parents to write handwritten letters telling personal stories about their child's success in the charter schools. And we collected all the letters, and it ended up being about 250 letters for each city, for each school. And we bound them all together, and we hit the Capitol during special sessions. And we called our representatives out of chambers in the middle of their work and spoke to them about the importance of equal funding for our children. And we handed them this huge stack of letters that they then had to carry back in with them and show the other representatives that this is something that's important to their constituents. And that's kind of important to remember as a parent leader, that you can elect all the officials you want to, and your elected officials might agree with you wholeheartedly on the issues, but if they don't have support from you as the constituent, sometimes they are not able to swing a vote the way that they want it to go. And so a couple of ways that you can easily engage your representatives is within your own community, get involved with charities and programs where your representatives are already involved. I managed to meet 2 of my own through the NAACP in my city. Another thing is, it's important the representatives and congressmen and women who are up for re-election are always looking for opportunities to meet the voters and to leave them with a good feeling. And so you can work a campaign. I worked in about 3 different campaigns this last season. Get to know them on a personal basis. And then you'll want to invite them also into your spaces. There's hardly a politician that will not seize on the opportunity to grab a microphone and make a speech. And that's a really, really good way to document the promises that they make, especially if there's media present. And it establishes a bit of a quid pro quo. You scratch their back, they scratch yours. You know, you put them up in front of the community and get them votes. They remember that. And then make yourself visible at your state capitol or in your local government, the city hall, and establish those relationships, because when you go for an ask, if you have a pre-existing relationship, it's a lot easier to get what you ask for. Or if you don't have a pre-existing relationship with them, then you want to bring large numbers, because they do respond to greater numbers of constituents. That's pretty well what I have for now.
Okay. I think that was a lot, and I would ask, I know there's a lot that you're engaged in. I also work at the Capitol, and I during session I would see Jackie there, and I would ask her, so what are you here for today? Because there was always a different cause. There was always a different policy issue that she was championing. So I know there's a lot. I have one question. I know you talked a lot about the collective movement, but were there times that you were moving alone without a group? Because I think in some areas, people maybe haven't been a part of coalitions or alliances. They haven't formed those relationships or bonds, or maybe they're standing alone on an issue. Are there times that you've been in that position, and what have you done if you have?
Yes, so good question. Just this past, I guess it was September, I was at a retired teachers conference doing a speech. And just talking to the teachers, I heard them all talking about their pension fund not being solvent. And I started asking them what was going on, and they told me the whole story about how they weren't going to be able to retire. And it really upset me. It really, I was just shocked. And so right then what I did was I took a picture of this room full of people and on my cell phone, and I immediately sent an email out to a state representative in their area, in their city, and with a quick message that, hey, these are your constituents, and a quick story, and just said, remember them when you're voting today, when you're pushing for, when you're deciding who gets how much funding, remember these people. There have been times when I visited the Capitol and whoever I was going to see wasn't in office. And a good way to engage then is you can do, I can't remember what they call them at the Capitol, but you basically drop into their office and you leave them a little love note, a note saying who you are, where you live, your contact information, and what you came to see them about. And that's taken in by their secretary, and the message is handed to them, and then they do get back to you.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Those are really good strategies. In my other role, and as I mentioned earlier on the call, I wear a few hats myself, and so one of the roles that I do play is I do work for the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors at our state capitol, and I am the PLTI state coordinator, and so in that work, I work with Stephen Hernandez, who's on the line. We have opportunity and sometimes access, maybe different types of access to legislators than the regular public. And so, those things that you shared with us, Jackie, are spot on. That is how you do it. And it really is about, relationship building and getting connected. Sometimes, it's you yourself. Sometimes there are others who can get you in to see a legislator, or get you in on the floor to have a discussion. So I think you really shared some good strategies with us. And then also, I would like to share that, we do have partners all around the country and internationally. PLTI is in Australia. We might have some of our friends on from Australia today. Actually, for them, it's Monday, I believe, already. And so some of this, feels very much like a U.S. conversation, and most of it will be. But as we continue, there will be some universal things that I think are applicable no matter how you're advocating around the world. So I won't lead too much into that, but I just want to encourage as we go. So as Jackie mentioned, there are different ways to engage in legislative session or participate, and it could be contacting your legislators, and how would you do that, right? And why? You want to share concerns, things that you're passionate about, or things that you're worried or concerned about, whether it's school budgets, or it's what's happening with teachers' pay, or taxes, whatever it is. You as a person who votes for these elected officials have a right to speak your mind and say your say. Yeah, so we're just going to ask you to mute your line. Thank you for joining us. So share your concerns with issues that you're passionate about. You can call their office. You can drop in, as Jackie said. You can send them a letter. And, nowadays you can shoot them email and connect with them on Facebook or Twitter. Legislators are everywhere, right? Your state representative, your state senators, they're everywhere. Another way that you can engage or participate is visit a town hall meeting or a community conversation. I have an example here of one of our state senators, Senator Marilyn Moore, and this is something that I grabbed from Facebook. She's promoting her community conversations on Facebook. And she's trying to get the word out far and wide that she wants to sit down and meet, and she wants to hear what her constituents have to say. And so we see these types of things everywhere. So they really do want to hear from you. You can also attend a public hearing. You can attend just to listen. You don't have to go to a public hearing to necessarily say anything or submit, or speak up. You can just go and observe. And that's a good thing to do. You can listen and hear what's going on. You can see how the room works. You can see how others do it. It's a great learning experience. It's a great way to gather information. You can also go to those hearings and offer up testimony on a particular topic. And then in some areas, I know in Connecticut we do have this. I'm not sure how much longer we'll have it due to funding cuts, but in some cases you can watch these public hearings live on TV or see recordings of them or replays. And usually that's accessible through your state website, your government website. You can connect, again, with your legislators on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and in most cases, they're posting about what they're doing and what they're passionate about and what they're fighting for, or what they're fighting against. Many legislators have newsletters or some type of communication that they send out, so you can sign up for that if you're not already getting it. Many times, you may be getting mailings in the mail. It might be a postcard or some letter that they're sending out quarterly, or some other increment of time where they're wanting to update their constituents on what they've been doing on their behalf. And those are good things for us to look at, because maybe there are issues that we feel aren't that important, and maybe the issues that are important to us aren't being covered, or we don't think that the legislator cares about them. So that would be another time where you can contact your legislator and say, hey, I got your newsletter and I see that you're involved in these things, but what about this? And again, you're the one who votes, we're the voters, we're the people who elect these officials, so we can do that. And then also another way to get involved is to write a policy brief. And I know for some people that sounds like a scary word. It's really not that scary. So what is a policy brief? A policy brief is a short, to-the-point, jargon-free document written for a non-specialist, right? And this means non-experts. It presents research or project findings to policy actors, and we'll go over that in a minute, highlighting the relevance of a specific research to policy and offering recommendations for change, right? So pretty much there's an issue that you're passionate about, and maybe you think that legislators or other people don't know about this issue, and you want to bring some awareness to it. So you do research, you get data, some statistics, and in very plain terms, you put it together, and you can share it with your legislators. So just to double back a little bit on policy actors, or lawmakers or implementers or influencers. That's what a policy actor is. It's, it's individuals or groups who have access, and I would say to power, but access to either public or private policymaking processes. So this includes lobbyists, advisors, within government, trade unions, think tanks even, the media, CEOs and chief financial officers of businesses and professionals within various industries. These are the kinds of people who like to see policy briefs. Why? Because they don't have to do the work. You've done it for them. And sometimes you're bringing issues to them that they're not aware of. And if it's something they can grab hold of and they can get behind, they'll share it with other people. It's really a great way to do, somewhat what Jackie has been doing, is taking those issues to our legislators and to people in power and saying, this is an important issue. Here's why. Here's the research. Here's the data. And now what can we do about it? So, that happens more frequently than you think. And, closer to home, in Connecticut, we had actually a school principal share a policy brief with Stephen Hernandez, right? Stephen is the executive director for the Commission on Women, Children, and Seniors here in Connecticut. And big things came out of that. So, Stephen, do you want to share, with the folks on the call what happened?
Oh, sure. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Yes. So, what's interesting, I think you made a wonderful point earlier in that you said that this power in legislature and power during legislative session is about access to the process. And, we by knowing the process and then by knowing, of course, the actors that are part of this process, we become part of that power infrastructure. There are narratives that really operate at a legislature, and they're shortcuts. I call them shortcuts. And they're stories that we tell about each other, that we tell about people, that we tell about our constituents. Part of those stories are parents don't have time. Parents don't care. Parents don't understand the process, and we speak well for them and on their behalf. But as we know, that's not always the case. In fact, in some instances, that's almost never the case. And what we have found, at least in Connecticut, is that parent voices that come from parents themselves about issues that they know the most about, and that is the best interest of their kids, really do resonate the strongest. And it breaks that narrative. It breaks that story that legislators tend to tell themselves about, we've got this. So I really wanted to start with that, and then secondly, in terms of access to the process, one thing that you give the example, Melvet, of this policy brief that became the driver for our Water Safety and Awareness Task Force. A young woman from the southern part of the state in Connecticut here came to us with a policy brief, with an idea, and it was essentially 2 pages on a piece of paper of a few facts that she found which were compelling to her. The first set of facts were kids with autism were drowning at alarming rates. In fact, 90% of children who drown children with autism who die prematurely die of a water-related incident. And then we also found that young kids, kids of color, Latinos and African-American children, were drowning disproportionately from their general population peers. And she found that compelling, interesting, and she found it to be an issue that she really wanted to move on in the legislature. She brought us that issue. The policy brief was written in plain language with good numbers, and for us, that was enough. So what we did is we presented this to our board in the commission. Now, as Milvette explained, we are a commission of the legislature. We staff the legislature. We are part of that process, but we're also a conduit for the public and the legislature, so we're a go-between in some ways. She came to us, we took this to our board, and the board was interested in creating a legislative task force. We have that in our mandate, where we're able to create task forces to consider issues of popular import, and 2 weeks later, they created that task force. And this is a mom, this is a principal in a little school in the southern part of the state who just took it upon herself to bring a few facts, align them in a compelling way, and tell the story of kids drowning in the state of Connecticut. And it really led now to a conversation that's being led by two legislators, a series of constituents from around the state, including our very own Stu Leonard and Mrs. Cohen, both of whom are leaders in this field who lost children to premature drowning. So it's exciting to see that. You know, it's much more accessible than you would imagine. In fact, it was just one parent making a call saying, I have an idea and I'd like to see if you can help me.
Wow, and yeah, it's powerful, and there's so much energy around that task force. Stephen, can you just share with them some of the agencies and foundations represented on the task force?
Sure. You know, one thing that we found is that when you think of water safety and awareness, the issue of water safety touches many of our local agencies in the state of Connecticut, many of our state agencies. So, for instance, of course, you have the State Department of Education potentially implicated because they could be including water safety and awareness in their curriculum. Certainly, you have Parks and Recreation because many of our families, you know, they don't encounter water in a personal swimming pool or even perhaps access to a lake or a beach. Sometimes it's a public park. Sometimes it's a local watering, you know, what we call a local watering hole, maybe a free public pool down at the end of the street. What we know and what the science tells us is that children can actually drown in 2 inches of water. So water safety and awareness could be about the bathtub. It could be about the sink. It could be about wherever it is children, little kids especially, encounter water. And really awareness on behalf of parents and community of what some of those risks may be when children are left unattended. So Parks and Recs are involved. Our State Department of Ed. We have the YMCAs have a very strong interest in this. We have our non-for-profit and philanthropic organizations like Stu Leonard's that are personally invested in this work. And then, of course, when you think of some of the other agencies, our Department of Health, our Department of Social Services, all of these are departments that in some way or another touch and concern our children and have an interest in finding and disseminating the best information on water safety and awareness and, of course, public health generally.
Thank you, Stephen. And then one more thing. So as folks are thinking of policy briefs and as we're preparing for 2018 legislative session, you know, what do you think are some of the hot topics? I know, for example, we've probably all seen it all over the news, but definitely federal tax reform is a topic and how that's going to affect states. You know, we're seeing that in New York, New Jersey, and other states as well who are really fighting. What are some of the other hot topics you think will, you know, parents might be interested in, or what we're hearing emerging as a big topics for 2018?
Sure. I think, you know, one thing that parents all over the state and, of course, all over the country are really thinking about, especially when you think of parents of younger children, they're thinking prevention. And really they're thinking about how do we teach our children the important social and emotional skills and connections and really relational connections, you know, how to trust, how to find a trusted adult, how to talk to your parents, how to manage and talk to and relate to other peers. And why is that important? It's important because it informs some of the later work that we think about, in drug prevention, in prevention of self-harm later in a child's development. It also builds those important skills that we call, that space, that white space in between the ink on a resume, which really is those skills that are going to help you work together with other people and really be a successful and productive young person when you leave high school. So parents are interested in prevention. That's a hot topic now, and especially as it relates to social and emotional skills building. Literacy, early literacy, being able to read by third grade is also a hot topic, a perennial hot topic, because parents want to know, how can I ensure that my child is reading by third grade at the level that they should be? When it comes to the early development, early child development, quality daycare, quality care, and quality care and education. And how is it that I could ensure, if I'm a working parent and I want to make sure that my child is receiving quality early care and education, how do I ensure that that's happening? How do I ensure, if I am making a certain salary, a modest salary, that I don't make too much so that I lose my benefits? And if that is a benefit cliff that I am facing, how do I work with legislators so that we help close those benefit cliffs, so that if you do get a raise, if you do see an opportunity coming down the pipeline, you aren't penalized, and that you don't lose your daycare or child care or transportation subsidies. So these are things that we're thinking about in our legislature when it comes to parents. We're also, of course, thinking about, how do we prepare our young people to be successful in careers? And more we're seeing that it's actually in middle school and even earlier in some cases, where children are forming their early interests and they're forming their early ideas about what they may want to do, what interests them, what's exciting to them. And we think about our young girls and science and math and technology, and how few young girls are encouraged to actually pursue those careers. We think about our young boys and girls, and how, for many of these kids, college may not be the pathway that is most desirous or effective for them. They may think, I want to have a trade. I want to work. I want to be an engineer. I want to learn the skills that I need to start being productive and successful as soon as I can. And for these kids, we really need to tailor a path for each child. And that's what I think parents are interested in, and especially how is it that they can work with state and local officials to bring the resources that they need to their schools, so that these pathways are possible for their children.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And Jackie, as someone who's out and about in the community and the state, and definitely you are, you're initiating some of these issues and bringing them to the forefront, and gathering people within alliances and coalitions to move to action. What are some of the issues that you'll be working on with your various coalitions for 2018, or what are you hearing that people are interested in?
I'm going to echo a lot of what was just said.
Or if there's an addition.
Yes, of course. Parents are very, very interested in access to the process. Some big issues within our school district here are clean water. We did have some of our schools test high for lead. And the parents are pushing for their voice to be heard and for there to be transparency in the process of how this is being dealt with. And it's just very similar, like parents are basically believing in the parents and also involving the children in the process, the youth themselves, that there's a big push for hearing their voices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
I would agree. I would definitely agree with that. And so, there are a number of topics, both, within, states, within people's communities, definitely nationally. There, I think, are some themes that would apply, whether it's, the Every Student Succeeds Act, that, being implemented in district plans, and how that is working on local levels and what people are seeing from that within their communities and how much parent engagement is really happening. With that, as well as immigration, I think we're going to see a lot around immigration and more people standing up and kind of getting to the forefront and holding some legislators accountable for what they feel should be happening. And then I think also the opioid crisis, right? I think that's something that will affect everyone, not just, parents, children, but grandparents. I think it's, more of a whole family. And a lot of these issues, I think, cross, at some point touch everyone in families. So moving on, I just wanted to touch quickly on, we talked about how to engage legislators, but here are some ways that legislators actually engage their constituents. So it's actually a good matchup to know kind of like what they do, where their heads are at. And, in many cases, the legislators like to go where, their constituents are. And so they try to get out into the communities. There's one representative from New Mexico, Rick Murera, and he has been going to neighborhood association meetings for 20 years. It's just something that he does, and he finds it to be effective, and so he continues to do that. Each year before the start of session, some legislators, they work together as a team. And so they kind of like, instead of dividing and conquer, they kind of all, use their resources together. And so each year before the start of session, out in Wyoming, 6 Sheridan County legislators participate in a 2-day legislative forum sponsored by the local Chamber of Commerce. And so, they're trying to come together as a united front and show their constituents that they care and they want to hear from them. So there are different ways that they do it. They convene their stakeholders, their key stakeholders. And that's important. They want to really discuss special issues and gain some insight and understanding from groups and what their priorities are. So as Jackie said, there are times where they just kind of like, hey, we need you to meet with these 100 people that are out here, and here are our letters. So sometimes they actually initiate those convenings as opposed to, being bullied into them, so to say. And bully is probably not a good word, but sometimes there's a lot of pressure that constituents put on their legislators, and at some point they give in. And so other legislators are more proactive and invite their constituents into the space to kind of understand what's going on. And then also they use partners. They use their community partners. So they also have alliances and coalitions, and whether it's a meet the candidate when they're going for re-election, or their community conversation, there are a lot of people who partner with local nonprofits or the school system or other agencies or group within those communities, and they get together. So pictured here on your screen, we have Hilda Santiago and Kathy Abercrombie, and they're both state representatives, and I'll just add also that they both graduated from PLTI in Connecticut. And, Hilda, gets together and, they do these meet and greet town halls at the library. So it doesn't always have to be a fancy thing. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but, they do put importance on it, and they try to hold them in spaces and places that their constituents can get to, and that are, places that they might normally go within their communities. So I guess the big question, too, is, how do we continue advocacy and civic engagement in the current political climate? I guess we could sugarcoat it, but why should we? Let's just go there and talk about, the current political climate, the current presidential election, the current elections that have been happening, not only, in our cities and states, but around the country. And, okay, we want to extend it globally. There have been elections happening there. And, there seems to be a lack of civility, happening. There are a lot of uncivil actions, and, people are name-calling and bullying and the like, and then doing some things that are just not what we would expect of our government officials. And so, it seems that, it has taken priority over what we might like to think is respectful dialogue and a healthy exchange of diverse viewpoints. And I think what makes government great and what makes civics great and civic engagement great is that, you know, people's viewpoints have to be heard and appreciated and respected. Whether you agree to disagree, it's important to at least allow people to say what they need to say and be cordial. So, you know, incivility has captured the attention of the public. We see it in media. We see it everywhere. And, you know, and how does this affect our state legislatures? What's happening, you know, more on a local level? And, you know, what we've learned from the National Council on State Legislatures is that there is a big push to engage differently and to really be civil toward each other. And so they've set up all different types of committees, and they've set up, you know, best practices for legislators to engage in different ways and to build relationships so that they can have these discussions and conversations without kind of going below the belt. And so what does that say for us as you know, as citizens, as people living in these spaces and places and these environments? You know, do we learn from our legislators? Do we rise above happening and what we're seeing played out in the media and on TV and what we're hearing? You know, or do we, you know, take a stand and say that, you know, the way we operate it will be in a civil way. It will be polite and respectful. And, you know, it can be robust. It can be exciting. We can debate and there could be active listening, but we can certainly exchange viewpoints without attacking each other's character. And, you know, being civil doesn't mean compromising on your values or that, you know, agreement is certain or required. It just means that, you know, we operate in a state of respect and in that respecting, you know, everyone's viewpoint and that people's voices should be heard. So here are some resources. We're not quite at the end, so don't check out yet, but here are some resources that you can tap into to find out about legislative sessions in your particular states. I just put a few examples up here for California, Connecticut, and Colorado. I just did the C's, right? But, you know, certainly if you go to Google and you type in, you know, state legislature or state government and you type your state, you know, website is going to pop up, or you can go there and you can find all sorts of cool information about when sessions begin, when, you know, you can see the calendar for hearings. You also see the calendar for what's going on. You could learn about what bills are in play and what's being proposed. Another great site to visit, and it's really simple, it's Everyday Democracy. Its name speaks for itself. If you want to learn more about process and democracy and how it works here, you can check that site out. And there's also one, Democracy Works. And as I mentioned today, there's a National Conference of State Legislatures. We can get a lot of good information on how state legislatures work. They have a lot of policy briefs there that you can review and look at and learn from. So here's an example for you. This is what our Connecticut State Legislature website looks like. It's called Connecticut General Assembly. And as you can see here, you know, this is the opening page. On the right of the screen, it has the broadcast media where you can just kind of click and view what's happening in the House, or click and view what's happening in the Senate. And then there, you also can click and find out what's going on in hearing rooms. That's really cool when funding allows. That works really well. And then on the left, as we go toward the bottom of the page, it says CGA Daily Records for Friday, December 15th. I tried to get us a, you know, one that was very soon. It shows the bulletins. It shows a list of the bills passed. That was as of 12/15, and things like that. So really cool stuff that you can find on your pages. This next page, this was actually the bottom of that first page. It shows the schedule of events. So you can see when the public hearings are happening, or when legislators are hosting meetings, or when task force are meeting. And these are all open to the public in most cases in every state. So you can just go and sometimes sit and listen to what's going on. And so that's pretty cool. Also, there is here a thing where you could do bill tracking, and I circled there in orange for the general public. You click that link and you can track bills. You can kind of type in search words, or if you know the bill number, you can type it in and you can see where that bill is going, at what stage it's at. And then here's something that's helpful. You can find your legislators. So there are similar aspects of this on every state website because they want to make it easy for you. And so we have come to the end of what we have to offer, and we're going to get ready to open it up for Q&A. So as I'm preparing things and looking in the chat to see if we have any questions, and as you're thinking of your questions, I want to bring greetings from the NPLI team. I have pictures here because maybe you don't get to see their faces that often. But, you know, pictured here on the left, we have Donna Thompson-Bennett and Patty Kekison. They are our co-directors. And then Zulema Gomez, she's the implementation specialist, and Carolyn Lee Davis, who's the operations manager. And then on the right picture, that's Donna and Patty and myself. There I am. Most people don't get to see me either. So I just wanted to give you some faces to put to the names. And we have Patty Kekison on the call who's going to bring greetings. Patty, are you ready?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Hi, this is Patty Kekison with Donna Thompson-Bennett. We are the co-directors of the National Parent Leadership Institute, and I'm so delighted that so many of you have joined the call from Brisbane in Queensland all the way from Hawaii and all across the states. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And a special thank you to Melvet and to our participants, our speakers, Stephen and Jackie, for being with us this evening. This is a real opportunity for us to take a moment to really think about how do we prepare for the legislative session, we as parent leaders. How do we prepare for this upcoming legislative session? You know, we can think about our PLTI process. We can think about, you know, when you filled out your PLTI application form, the question on the form was most likely, what is your concern for children today? Well, that concern reflects a deep sense of commitment and longing that we have as parents for our children. And that issue becomes our policy issue area. So we encourage you to think about what is your policy issue area? How do you reach out to your legislators, whether it's, you know, if you're in a rural area and it's a knock on the front door and it's a cup of coffee on the porch, or whether it's more of a formal meeting in a more formal setting, we encourage you to make those connections and to use your voice on behalf of children and families. Thanks, Melvet, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Patty, for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And thank you for your time and being with us on the call. So I'm going to open it up now for questions. I didn't see any questions in the chat. But we did have Audrey on in the chat, and she said that it was awesome. And it's similar to what Courtney and Courtney have trained people in the BCVC who were interested in legislative and advocacy work. So that's great. That, you know, this is definitely, some of it is definitely, you know, state specific, some of it is U.S. specific, and other things, you know, are applicable to all. So we're so glad that we had people here and finding that the information was useful. So do we have any questions? If you have a question, you can put it in the chat if you found the chat. Oh, Audrey said, sorry, she didn't mean to post that in the group. That's okay, Audrey, but thanks. It's okay. We're glad that you thought the information was good and that we were on the right page. If you do have a question, you want to put it in the chat, or if you know, you'd like to unmute your line, and we'll try that. I'll give you just a moment to unmute your line, and we'll try to do one at a time. You could just announce yourself and your name. No questions.
I have a question.
Okay, and who is that for the question?
Hi, this is Lori from Florida. I live in Miami-Dade County specifically. Thank you all for convening this call and bringing everyone together at this important time, first of all. I have a question, in reference to accessibility. At the beginning of the call, there was a comment made regarding relationship building and accessibility, and I really believe that is key to addressing many concerns and to getting things done in different realms. I guess the concern that I have with this, though, and I would definitely appreciate some feedback about this, is that in South Florida, many of our representatives do not hold town hall meetings. They basically leave themselves inaccessible. They have offices that are in private buildings where you're not allowed in many situations to enter. It's very, very difficult to try to build a rapport with them in any way. And it really leaves people feeling that they're not heard. In different ways, especially the lower income population. Miami-Dade County has a poverty rate of over 20%. And I feel like a lot of people here are just giving up. And so I'm asking for suggestions, really, as to what people might think the best way to try to address this with this kind of climate here might be.
That's a really good question, and I'll start, and then I'll open it up to Jackie or Stephen, whoever wants to chime in. I think there has to be a systems change, and that starts. And I'm not sure what has been done in the past, what type of advocacy or movements have taken place to bring that to the forefront, right? To help the legislators understand, we don't like that you siloed yourself. We don't like that you're not accessible. And I can imagine, I'm just imagining that maybe that conversation has happened before, and maybe there wasn't much that came out of it. But I think, there is an accountability that legislators have to their constituents. And, it's very easy to say, well, just don't vote for them, right? Because that's everyone's answer. Well, just don't vote for those people. But that doesn't always happen, right? Because sometimes the one issue that might be, a smaller issue or an important issue is not as large as the other issues that person is able to advocate for and to make happen for those constituents. But it sounds like to me that there needs to be some advocacy for accessibility that needs to take place, right? And it's not just the one person, but there's got to be other groups who feel the same way, I would imagine. And so it's really, talking about coalitions and getting people together to move that agenda, to say that we, are making the suggestions or inviting, right? So if they're not accessible in their space, they won't allow you to come to them, then there's the invitation for them to come to you, and you meaning the constituents, right, wherever that is, and then trying to hold them accountable, right, so making it very public, and not in necessarily a negative way, but that, people want to get to know them, people want to talk to them, and so that would be my advice to start. But, Stephen or Jackie, do you have other things to add?
I'd like to say that if these people are being elected and reelected, then they have a constituency and they do have a space where they are reaching that constituency. So they have effectively shut you out of a system that they rely on and that is reliable for them. So what I would recommend, and this is just off the top of my head considering some of the things that we do here, but what I would recommend is that you create a critical mass of constituents and collect together. talk together, meet in a public space, meet in a space that is accessible to them and say, we are going to meet with or without you, and we are going to talk about the issues that really matter. Invite the local press. Create a space where they will feel they need to come to, and then quite frankly, invite them and say, this is going to happen with or without you. It seems like it seems like pushing the envelope, and it can feel that way, but really what it is that you are expanding the civic space, and you are saying to them, we now know that we are a critical component of this civic space. This is how we express it. You are welcome to come and address these important constituents, who will be voting next November.
Yeah, thank you. We have made some progress in that we have done just that in holding town hall meetings and having a space physically with a chair at a table or in a space on a panel for them to be present, and it's made known and very visible that they choose not to show up, especially around the issue of healthcare. That's one of the big issues here in Florida. And we're trying different ways. We do have a pretty solid social justice community here, and we have made some progress with organizing, as well as community development and in some ways even direct social work and how that's addressed, which is primarily the work that I do. But it's definitely, it's just a huge challenge for us still to make headway in a way where we see people's lives change monumentally on a larger scale. And there is truly much work to be done in Florida. Thank you both for your feedback.
Thank you, Lori. That was an excellent question, and I think that we can do a little more research on that, and I can connect with you on maybe other things that can be done in concert with what you're doing, because it sounds like you're doing the right things, and sometimes it takes time, right? And it's not going to happen today or tomorrow or even this year. It might be years of effort, right, to see that change come about. And so I'm not saying that to discourage, but to encourage you that you don't lose hope of what you're doing, and that every day that you're doing that and every day that you guys continue at it, that you're still working toward, you're chipping away each day at it. So I took a note so that if there's other information we can provide to you or share with you, we can certainly do that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Other questions?
Hello, my name is Bhuvan Pegriel. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. I have a question. You partially answered that question before, but to be clear, how do I know that what legislations are up in the coming session?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
How do I know what kind of legislations are coming up and to follow up those things?
Okay, so what state are you in? I'm sorry.
Ohio.
Okay, and so you want to know when your legislative session is coming up?
Now, what kind of legislation, what kind of laws are being made? How do I know that so that I need to be involved?
Right. So you can go to your state's website, the government website, and that's one way where you can find out some of the bills that are being proposed when session starts. But the other way that you can, and then I'll let Stephen chime in as well. The other way that you can find out what's going on is contacting your legislator. And saying, so what are your priorities for this legislative session? You can ask them, because they all are working on something.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And also, if I could just add, before I sign off, many of our legislatures, our state legislature here in Connecticut included, has on their website a list of bills as they're being introduced. In some states, they list them either numerically, so these are the bills that are introduced today, yesterday, and the day before. Other states have taken it upon themselves to create an index of the types of bills that are being introduced. I want to turn your attention to a very important resource that we use in tracking state legislation called the National Conference of State Legislatures, NCSL. And NCSL is great because what it does is it actually keeps track of a lot of these states, and the legislation that are coming from these states are being introduced, and in some cases there may even be some discussions that they're leading at the national level on what individual states are doing. So I'd love to turn your attention to that. The National Conference of State Legislatures, it's a great resource.
Thank you.
Yes, and we provided that that website. It'll be in the PDF that we, and it's also on here too. So you'll be able to have access to that. There it is. Thanks, Patty, for putting in the chat. It's also on the slides, and it's a great resource. So I know that Stephen has to leave us now, so we want to thank Stephen for joining us and lending his expertise to the call. Are there other questions that anyone has that perhaps might be for Jackie or myself? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, or are there any comments? I certainly want to be respectful of the voices that are here on the webinar, so if you have any additional comments, we'd like to hear from you before we sign off.
I want to say thank you so much for organizing, and we would like to have this, and personally I would like to have more of these things in the days to come, so that we would know mostly dividing by statewide, that would be still better. Thank you.